Good evening. Let me call to order the Thursday, January 22nd, 2026 meeting of the Woodland Park Planning Commission, 6:30 in the evening. We have roll call.
Certainly, sir. Don DeZellem.
Present.
Ken Hartsfield.
Here.
Don Hoying.
Here.
Vice Chair Kennedy.
Ken, I'm here.
Mr. Newcomb.
I'm here.
And Chair Lee Brown.
Here.
Also in attendance, we have online our city attorney, Nina Williams, and President and myself, the planning director, Karen Schmink, our consultant, Jennifer Gardner with Logan Simpson, and our permit tech, Grant Atai, will be our AV operator this evening. So that's all of your planning and city staff in attendance.
Okay, we'll do the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Yeah, I believe we all received a copy of the draft minutes for the January 8th, 2026 meeting. Comments, discussion, questions, motions?
Accept as presented.
I'll second. Did you get the motion?
Who seconded?
Don DeZellem.
And it was Hartsfield for the motion.
All in favor?
Aye.
Approved unanimously.
Okay, thank you.
Next item on the agenda is a public hearing regarding the Unified Development Code to consider an ordinance repealing Title 16 mobile homes, Title 17 subdivision, Title 18 zoning, and Section 5.24 wireless communication facilities of the Woodland Park Municipal Code, and to establish and adopt said regulations as the Unified Development Code for the City of Woodland Park, Colorado. Proposed document and additional information regarding this project can be found by searching Unified Development Code on the City of Woodland Park website at www.woodlandpark.gov. All right, can we have a staff presentation?
Sure. Welcome this evening. This is an exciting night for us here this evening because this group and some other members that have dropped off of Planning Commission over the years have been part of a project for 3+ years now to review those regulations that you just referenced and look at restructuring them into one unified development code. So a lot of time, work, energy, effort, attention to detail, extreme attention to detail has gone into preparing the document that we have in front of us this evening. So we're very excited to have this ripe for public hearing. And Jen is going to go into considerably more detail about our process and then the product we are bringing forward to you this evening. And I apologize in advance for the cough. It's the dry air. I'm not sick, I swear. So thank you for indulging me.
All right. I echo with what Karen said. It's really exciting to be here this evening to present the Unified Development Code for public hearing at the Planning Commission. So without further ado, I'll march on here. Get some things organized on the screen here real quick. Okay. So as we all know, the primary focus of this project was to restructure Title 16 mobile homes, Title 17 subdivisions, Title 18 zoning, and a portion of Title 5 regarding wireless communication facilities into a single unified development code, otherwise known as a UDC throughout. So you'll hear us use that term. That's what the Unified Development Code is known as. Language was updated and terminology modernized to ensure plain English for ease of use throughout the document, throughout that restructuring process. And purpose statements were added throughout to further ensure the usability of this new UDC. There were additional edits made, consolidation of the definitions and updating centralization and clarification of the application procedures throughout, adding detailed review and approval authority responsibilities with those application procedures, updating the use table to again modernize the terminology and add use specific standards, and then tying that over to the parking table, corresponding that terminology from the use table. We also incorporated recently adopted ordinances for short-term rentals, natural medicine business, and the water requirements for development. I wanted to kind of walk through the process a little bit about how we got here today. And this code update process did follow a robust planning process, including an extensive community engagement for the adoption of the city's new comprehensive plan in October of 2021. As that comprehensive plan serves as the aspirational document for the city, guiding future development and growth of the community, I wanted to make sure there was alignment with the code update as we went through that process. So the initial phase of the UDC project began toward the end of the comprehensive plan update process and involved a preliminary analysis of existing titles 16, 17, 18, and that portion of Title 5 in order to understand the city's priorities moving forward. As we all know, the top priority that resulted from that effort was a significant structural overhaul, which led us into phase 2 of the project that we're here looking at today, which involved combining all of those titles we've been talking about into this single unified development code. The process did include more than 20 work sessions. It's probably quite a bit more than 20, but we counted up at least 20 on our calendars, work sessions with Planning Commission over those 3 years. And again, thank the Commission so much for spending all that time with us to get to where we are today. Those work sessions were open to City Council and the Board of Adjustment. Many representatives from those boards did attend several of those meetings. Discussions focused on review of priority items, as well as identification of a list of kind of items to put to the side for future update at a later date. The proposed document also went through a full legal review to ensure compliance with state and federal regulations. So that brings us to this illustration of kind of a quick crosswalk of the existing structure to the proposed structure. So each of the current titles includes multiple chapters housing definitions, development standards, and administrative procedures. Those have been restructured into a single title. So we will, as the Commission Chair mentioned at the beginning of this meeting, we'll be repealing titles 16, 17, and 18 and replacing them with one single title comprised of 7 consistently formatted chapters, each of which serves a very distinct purpose, yet works together as one. All right. As this was a targeted update, largely focused on that restructuring, the project did steer clear of updating some existing specific metrics and provisions associated with items such as signs, parking, architectural design guidelines. Additionally, lot coverage, setback, lot size, density, and building height standards did remain the same. It is important to note that the requirements for operating short-term rentals do remain the same as what our citizens approved in Ordinance 1469 in December of 2023. All right. So during the process, a number of items were identified for future updates. Those projects will require additional conversations with the community, Planning Commission, and City Council in order to revise or develop new standards. For items such as architectural design standards, dark sky lighting, and parking metrics, the current landscape standards, we all kind of discussed throughout the process that those could be further clarified with regards to buffers and water-wise standards. The sign code, which was relatively untouched throughout this process, it is recognized that some minor edits could be applied to make sure that it's in compliance with federal regulations. There's additional items that were identified throughout the process when we were looking through the use table. There could be some additional clarification on location of manufactured homes, modular homes, tiny homes. The mobile home park regulations and procedures, again, were cleaned up to some degree, but probably could use another look. There's overlay maps included in the code that could be removed and just referenced, held on the city's website. The park definitions, although we compared the park definitions with the most recent Parks, Recreation, and Open Space Plan, it's always good to maybe go back to those, make sure they're serving the city well. The special use permit list, we did incorporate all the special use, the list of uses listed under the special use permit into the use table. There's probably still some cleanup that could be handled there. And in addition to that, there's a few uses that we identified very late in the process, power sports dealers, energy related uses that could be added to the use table. So probably some additional discussion on that. And outdoor storage, we addressed, I think the Planning Commission will remember, we addressed that quite a bit through the use standard discussions. And again, we found one small provision in there about a size for construction storage that seemed rather small, kind of sent up a red flag. So maybe something to look at in the future, as well as the city's engineering standards or specifications. Now I'm going to walk through, hopefully fairly quickly, chapter by chapter, kind of the purpose, what's in them. For those maybe online who are not as aware of the project, I know you all are very aware of what we did, but I'll try to keep this fairly brief. So chapter 1 is the general provisions. This is the purpose of this chapter really is to house the foundational rules and overarching terms that govern the entire document. So this establishes our title, authority, effective date, purpose of the UDC, establishes the UDC as the minimum requirements applicable to all land, building, structures, and uses located within the city. It includes interpretation of provisions and how they relate to other adopted policies, and incorporates provisions related to non-conforming structures, uses, violations, and enforcement. And I also will note that as part of adopting this UDC and the repealing that is taking place, this chapter includes information for navigating the transition from the old rules to this updated set of rules. Chapter 2, the purpose of this chapter is to identify the zone districts established by the City of Woodland Park. It does incorporate the official city zoning map and how to interpret the boundaries. General standard sections throughout the chapter direct users to chapters 3 and 4 for additional standards. This is just a little snapshot of how the content is organized. It establishes zone districts grouped by residential versus non-residential categories and identifies the reference section following this table that includes the standards for each zone district. The zone districts listed in this table are in the same order as the use table and the parking table. So we tried to have consistency throughout all of the different chapters with that organization. The manufactured home park was previously known as mobile home park. So that's one small change on this table. And then in each zone district description or section, it includes a purpose statement and a table of dimensional standards, and then any additional standards that are applicable. So like the manufactured home park section includes quite a few additional standards. A lot of the zone districts don't include any additional standards. Chapter 3. This is the development standards. So the purpose of this chapter is to provide development standards, performance standards, and design guidance for the development and redevelopment of property to facilitate the creation and maintenance of safe, functional, and aesthetically pleasing development. So this is going to include all your parking, lighting, landscaping, all those standards that are applicable to all development. And the contents of this chapter were combined from mostly Title 18, but some of Title 17. So you might find, like I said a minute ago, landscaping, fencing, screening, parking, signage in this section, as well as site and building design standards and erosion and sedimentation standards. And as I mentioned in the introduction of this presentation, that several of the sections that we identified for future updates were housed in this particular chapter. Chapter 4 is our use standards. So now that we've established the zone districts, we move into the uses. This chapter, the purpose is to provide regulations for how uses are allocated within each zone district, including use-specific design standards. The contents of this chapter were previously primarily in 18, and then a lot of the information from Title 5, telecommunications, was pulled over to this chapter as well. The chapter lists uses which can be developed within each zone district, detailed in Chapter 2. The short-term rental standards do remain the same, were incorporated into this chapter. And standards applicable to all uses, including items such as neighborhood character, fire, odor, particulate emissions, smoke, and traffic, have all been combined into one section so they don't get repeated throughout. A little walkthrough of the new use table. On the left, the column on the left includes all of the uses listed, categorized very similarly to the current code under accessory uses, then agricultural uses, as you can see here. The P's, C's, S's, T's, G's are blank cells, identify permitted uses, conditional uses, special uses, if a temporary use application is required. The G is sort of new. It identifies if a use might be allowed by PUD, general development permit, and you will only find those in the PUD column. I should mention the zone districts are listed across the top. And then we added a column called standards, which references the standard section that follows this table. So again, alphabetically, and it will be hopefully clickable in the codified version, so you can click and go down to the use standard and then come back up to the table. Many use labels have been consolidated or renamed for consistency and modernization, and all the definitions of these terms are housed in Chapter 7. Wanted to just kind of provide a real quick overview of how all of these different pieces work together. So you have your established zoning in Chapter 2. And then we, so if you were going to look at a use, say home occupation, you wanted to open a home occupation in your home, you would go to the zoning map, see what you're zoned, go to that zoning chapter, move over to this use table, see how the use is allocated. You may need to go look at the definition to make sure you understand what a home occupation is included, and then any specific standards. So that's kind of how all the different components and pieces work together. All right, Chapter 5, the subdivision standards. The purpose of this chapter is to provide regulations specific to physical design of subdivisions. And additional detailed design requirements are located in the city's engineering specifications. So you'll see those listed quite a few times throughout this section. The content, it applies holistically to all subdivision of land, and the contents of this chapter are primarily located currently in Title 17. We spelled out in this chapter the different classifications of subdivisions as minor, major, and exempt. Those classifications do exist, but we spelled them out more clearly. And then the procedures, application requirements, and review criteria are all housed in Chapter 6. So that was kind of separating the standards from the application procedures. General standards that must be met when subdividing land that were included in this chapter are street design, bicycle and pedestrian trails, utilities and easements. There's dedication of parkland or payment in lieu of land dedication section is included in this chapter. Substantial research was done to clarify terminology and eliminate confusion in this particular portion of the chapter. And then the subdivision improvement agreement and financial guarantees are located in this chapter as well, as they relate to subdivisions of land. And as we mentioned earlier, the city engineering specifications are probably ready for a bit of a overhaul and coordination with the UDC. All right, chapter 6 is our administration chapter. This chapter, the purpose is to provide regulations for the administration of this UDC, including identification of decision-making bodies and their associated roles as it pertains to the code. I will note that this chapter, although all the components of the chapter are housed in existing titles, this chapter is fairly new because the current code, as we all have talked about in the past, includes, I don't know, 40 or 50 references of approval procedures throughout. And so combining them all in one chapter was what we decided to do for ease of use of that information. Provisions of this chapter are applicable to all development applications and have been combined from titles 16, 17, 18, and 5. Processes for reviewing applications, like I said, are now centralized, reformatted with a very consistent format throughout this chapter, and expanded for ease of use. I think one of the nicest portions of this chapter that really help administration of this code is this particular table. And this is the development review summary table, which identifies every application type, if a pre-application conference is required, and then who is the review or decision-making authority, whether a public hearing is required, and then also the reference section for each of the application types later in the document or in the chapter. We found tables such as this to be very, very useful for all parties involved in development. And how those components kind of work together. So you identify your duties of review and decision-making authorities. We have common review procedures. So rather than repeating the same common review procedures over and over in our specific procedures, we put them all in one section. And then all of that relates to the specific procedures for public hearings or for permits and administrative review. As I said before, consistent formatting throughout each of the application types or throughout the whole chapter. And each application type includes a purpose statement, applicability, the specific procedure to follow, submittal requirements, and review criteria. All right, our last chapter. Chapter 7, definitions. The purpose of this chapter is to define certain words, phrases, or uses found throughout the UDC. We did remove all obsolete definitions. So we've combed through the code to make sure that any language we updated and removed, that the definitions associated were also removed. We updated terminology to modernize several definitions. Many of the terms correspond to the proposed uses listed in the use table of chapter 4. And then all definitions are alphabetized for ease of searching the document. One last thing on that, there were several categories listed here that had multiple definitions embedded under them. And so to identify them, we've grouped them and given them an acronym at the beginning so that it's a little easier to search through the definitions that are specifically relevant to those uses. All right. With that, I will pass it over to the chair. I've left up a slide on the staff's findings and potential recommendation that you all may consider. Staff did find that the UDC meets the objectives of the project, is legally sound, and provides a functional structure for the city's zoning and subdivision regulations. That concludes my presentation.
Okay, thank you, Jen.
Thank you.
Anything else, Karen, for comments?
I just want to note that. Excuse me. I just want to note that all 7 chapters that are the subject of tonight's hearing were posted on the city's website in compliance with the requirements. So they've been up since the 7th of January, I think. So they've been readily available for inspection. And then of course that month prior to that, it was open for just additional public review and comment if there was anything folks had concerns about. We received, I think, roughly 250 comments during that period, and we looked at every single one of those. January 6th was a bit of a blur, so we made sure we got through all of them in a timely manner. So they were incorporated into what was posted. In your packet, and then also on the website, because we've got a whole section dedicated to this project. There was the staff report that went out to you all regarding this. So it really did summarize a lot of the procedural history around how we got to where we were. And then there was another summary of substantive changes that was available for folks to take a look at. So hopefully that satisfied any concerns you might have in terms of like what were the bigger things that did get tweaked. So that is there. And that was anything within that document was reviewed by you all. So we're very comfortable with the product we're bringing forward this evening. And our recommendation is to repeal those existing titles and recommend City Council adopt this new Unified Development Code. So, thank you.
Thank you, Karen. For public comment, any questions for the staff?
I have two questions. The first one is with regards to any grandfathering or how this code will go into effect versus anything that might be in play. So somebody has submitted a preliminary plat, but they haven't done their final plat. So what happens to them when this code goes into effect? Have we got those things detailed in any way?
Preliminary plats are typically good for 2 years. And I'm just not remembering what our transition provision was. If there is a definitive sunset clause, I'm just not recalling it, but it is,
Okay.
it's a great question. A lot of times it's actually, especially since we didn't change metrics, so it really is more about process and procedure. So the new application that comes in, you're needing to meet the new application process. And, with that preliminary versus a final plat example, one of the primary criteria is this consistent with the preliminary plat?
Sure.
So if the preliminary plat had a prior approval, we're still looking for that consistency going forward.
In that particular example, I don't think there was any change to how those things are addressed in between what we had and what we got, but there may be some things that come up that there's some minor clarifications or differences. So the other question I had was could you review just the sequence of, this was the first step of the public hearing process for these 7 chapters for this code and for this recommendation. What would happen next as far as the city council's hearing? And then would they just, after that hearing, immediately, if it is approved, sign it into the code? Or is there any other steps between now and it going into play?
With hopefully a positive recommendation from you all this evening, that is then transmitted to City Council. We do have a work session scheduled with them for February 5th. To help orient them to the document, answer questions, help them be in a place so that they're feeling pretty confident and prepared to conduct a public hearing on this document. I believe initial posting of that ordinance would be February 19th, and then their public hearing is scheduled for March 5th. So similar to how you conduct a public hearing, they would be doing the same thing. And then I would need to double check with the city clerk, but I'm pretty sure that it's effective upon that adoption.
Okay. I've got the summary of substantive changes that was given to the planning commissioners. I guess the one thing I was looking for, was there any legal updates to meet federal and state laws that we didn't talk about in any of our meetings or reviews that came up subsequent to our submitting this in the period when you were adjusting this for comments and other things in that January timeframe?
The city attorney's legal review occurred right after your comprehensive review this summer.
Mm-hmm.
So any of those suggestions were incorporated right after that. So
Nothing since then.
Nothing since then.
Okay.
And Nina's available if she wants to add anything, but her primary things that she made recommendations around really was to chapter 1. So that's the the legal framework for the rest of the code and starting to, or enforcement, those kind of things. I remember there was a number of things that she had requested there. That was probably one of the more substantial sections that we heard from her on.
Okay, thanks.
Sure.
Okay, there being nothing else, we open the item for public hearings. Do we have anyone signed up?
I believe you've got one person in the office, audience here in the room, and I got one person online. So who would
All right.
you like to visit with
Let's
first?
start the person in person first, if you would. Mr. Larson, would you identify yourself?
Larry Larson. I live in the Northwoods neighborhood, and I reside at 1320 Michael Lane. First of all, I'd like to say, forgive my appearance tonight. I had a little confrontation with my dermatologist on Tuesday, and she won, and so I look pretty well beat up at this point. I feel pretty much beat up. I'd like to thank the Planning Commission and staff and allow me the opportunity to provide my opinions regarding the UDC. I want to further address the UDC and the relationship with the comprehensive plan, the 2030 Envision Woodland Park document. I think staff did a very good job of outlining how that relation occurs. I'd like to give you some specific details, which I think are very important for you to understand and for the city council to understand, and that this project is directly related to how the comprehensive plan was developed and what it was envisioned to happen from that process. In the fall of 2021, the Woodland Park Planning Commission and the City Council approved and endorsed the joint resolution adopting the Envision 2030 Woodland Park Comprehensive Plan. The plan states very clearly that it is aspirational. It's important to know what the meaning of aspirational means. A strong desire for guiding Woodland Park into the community we all want it to be. And that came out of the planning process. The plan is not regulatory. It does not include any standards, criteria, or requirements. The plan provides guidelines towards the future development and growth of our community. The plan was envisioned to be implemented through stated specific goals, objectives, and actions, and the 2030 future land use map. Upon adoption of the plan, it was intended to begin the comprehensive land use code revision. Since that time, this process has commenced and getting close to the end. Specifically, the plan chapter 2, land use and growth, provides for the following vision statement: to ensure that the city provides suitable and manageable growth that sustains healthy places to live, work, play, and learn. Chapter 2, land use and growth goal, states, provides opportunities, growth, and development while preserving the community and environmental quality. Chapter 2, land use and growth, also includes 5 important objectives. Objective 101, ensure that new development fits with the intent of the 2030 land use future land use map. 1.3, mitigate the impacts of growth and development. 1.4, update city annexation policies. 1.5, work with Teller County and neighboring communities to establish a common planning priorities. I want to jump back to 1.2, which is very important for this project tonight. Land use growth in objective 1.2, evaluate city regulations and requirements and to ensure that proposed development negative impact on neighborhood and commercial districts in which they are located is minimized and the positive impact is optimized. Ensure that development is consistent with the goals, objectives, actions in this plan. Under that objective are 2 action items. Land use and growth action 1.2.1. Review and revise the zoning code and specifically land use categories as needed to ensure that some of the things have been established now during this process, but some of them have been addressed in future revisions, including encourage mixed-use buildings such as live, work units downtown in the neighborhoods, encourage accessory dwelling units such as mother-in-law suites that can function as small apartments, provide for an ease of understanding and use of the code, to enforcement through prompt and fair procedures, and include appropriate dimensions, standards, and setbacks for various land use categories. A lot of these things have been done with the process that you have just reviewed right now for the UDC. And the last action is to evaluate the existing city zoning matrix to ensure that consistency with land use categories as designed within this plan. The UBC establishes the foundation in which the plan goals, objectives, and actions can be realized and achieved. This is the primary instrument. And it provides that foundation for future code requirements. Again, I thank you, the Planning Commission, for your hard work and commitment. It has been a long process, and your devotion to do the right thing for our community is recognized and appreciated. If I was sitting in your place, I would vote to recommend that the City Council approve the UDC now. It is important to do so now, to allow this supportive council of sound, reasonable community planning and reasonable growth to provide for their final approval of the UDC. Please approve the plan tonight, the UDC. And I'll answer any questions you may have.
Thank you, Larry.
You're welcome. Thank you.
We have someone online, Karen?
We do. Mr. Spurnans, if you would like to unmute yourself, you should be able to speak now.
Okay, I just unmuted. Can you hear me okay?
You can. Thank you.
All right. Thank you for the opportunity to give a comment here. Anyway, the UDC looks great. I think it's obviously a lot of hard work that the city has done and with support and looking at that cleaned up structure, especially the way that you do, the references rather than having to point people, it looks very good. My questions or concerns would be around with this volume of changes, what level of auditing, have we gone through to make sure we haven't intentionally included any unintended changes, errors, or omissions. So it's hard for the public to follow along when you had your open work sessions, because even though we requested copies of the working documents so we could see which things you were deleting and where they were going and what was happening, they were never provided. Always with the premise of saying, since they are working documents, they're going to be changing, and so we don't want them to get out. So, that wasn't a real productive process for the public to see what was going on there. And so, although the final product looks good, then it's like, how do we have confidence in what was there before and what's changed? And so I just did a quick little, let me look at something that I'm familiar with. And I saw something under short-term rentals for the non-primary residence STRs, and it says no changes. But if I look at the new use table, it shows that in PUDs that non-primary residence STRs are PC, and they were very explicitly, not a permitted use because they were the biggest problem areas, ranging from a lot of the development around the golf course and the problems up there, as well as tiny home development areas. And so, that's just in looking at it about a 5-minute sample, one thing. Maybe it's the only error or omission that's in there, but it would be very useful to be able to see what was there before and what's there after, rather than just having to see a comment that says nothing changed, actually being able to have a more explicit cross-reference. And I think as people look at the magnitude of changes, I think that could do a lot to really improve the confidence in the new document, because there is a lot of good work there, that we want to make sure it has no issues. So that was my comment.
Okay, thank you. Before we close the public comment, Richard, anyone who's online who wishes to speak should put their, push the button to raise their hand.
I didn't have anybody else online.
All right. That being the case, then we'll close the public comment section. Karen, are you able to address the comment made about the portion of the short-term rental ordinance that was?
I'm
With-
looking
with
something up
questions?
right now to be able to do that. So just bear with me for another minute.
Well, she's looking at that. Other comments or?
While she's doing that, it's worth noting that the baseline for comparison isn't just the old code. It's the old code plus any ordinances that have been passed and have not yet been incorporated into the code. So I suspect that's probably
Say that again, please. I'm sorry, what?
the baseline for the UDC is the previous code plus any ordinances that have been passed that had not been incorporated into the previous municipal code. So you have to be careful when doing this audit, as was suggested, make sure that the baseline is the correct, fully up-to-date baseline. I suspect that might be the case for this discrepancy.
Okay, so with short-term rentals in our current use table, specific to PUD zones, the non-primary residence short-term rental is prohibited. A primary residence short-term rental is listed as permitted in PUDs. And we can certainly make that particular revision to this use table. So it's absolutely consistent with that. In our zeal to throw in G under the PUD column, which is a reference to that PUD's general development plan. Because some PUDs are more oriented towards businesses, some may be more residential. We didn't want to make grand assumptions about what may or may not go in a PUD zone. And that's where previously, where you saw a lot of permitted conditionalities, was very confusing and troubling to try and navigate. So that's why we were looking at it as a G, that you would need to go back to the specifics for that PUD in terms of what uses are potentially permitted or require conditional uses, within that PUD zone. With regard to short-term rentals, since that's related to the citizens ordinance, that's an easy enough adjustment that you all could make here this evening, recommending that that then be reverted back to how it currently appears in our use table. So that PUD column for the short-term rentals, a non-primary residence STR would be prohibited in a PUD zone, and a primary residence short-term rental would be permitted in the PUD zone.
Comments on that? There's no discussion. Is it worth a straw poll to see if everyone agrees?
Well, I appreciate Mr. Spartan's comments, and if, I think we need to be consistent with our previous, the intent was we're not making substantive changes. And if that's consistent with the voting populace, we need to revise accordingly.
I think that's why we have public comment to help identify these things. So that's, looks like everyone's nodding their heads on this subject that we recommend that modification be made.
Okay, Jen, so to help us navigate that, we've got a specific document put together. So Jen, if you want to share that screen, and since this is an item from chapter 4, it's in the use table. So that's 4.03-1. And then it would be on page 4-5. So under the PUD column, short-term rental, non-primary residence should be listed with a blank cell indicating that those are prohibited. Making sure Jen catches up to my speaking. And then a short-term rental primary residence would be listed as a P under the PUD column. Since that is how it appears in the ordinance that was adopted by our community in December of 2023.
Just to clarify, are we going to use the G reference in that column as well?
Not according to that citizens ordinance, it would be listed as a P.
No, I
and
meant
then a
just
blank
elsewhere in the
cell.
column under other, I meant elsewhere under other uses. Are we going to use the G like you've shown in the
Within the PUD column,
PUD column? Yes.
I would recommend that, yes.
Okay.
There are instances where you see a P. I think one of those was accessory structures. You also see a T listed occasionally if it's something that would require a temporary use permit. So
Mhm.
there are a few exceptions,
Sure.
but there's a lot of things that really would be established as part of that PUD zone district.
So just for my reference, could you explain to me if there's a P under PUD permitted use versus a G PUD general development plan? What's the difference in the interpretation of those two items?
If it's a P, that use would be allowed in that PUD zone. If it's a G, you need to go look at the general development plan for the PUD to verify whether or not that
It's
could be-
permitted on
Yep.
the,
Yeah, because every time you establish a PUD, you're setting up, it's like you're.
it's part of what you put in the PUD is what's permitted in that area.
Exactly, it's a kind of the Chinese menu of zoning districts. I want one of these and one of these and one of these, none of those, none of those. And, you don't adopt, revise the code for every single one of those PUDs. You're instead establishing this other ordinance, and those provisions, any setbacks, that kind of stuff is part of that general development plan for the PUD.
Exactly. Okay.
Can the development plan prohibit an item that has a P?
I'm potentially needing to defer to Nina on that. I would think potentially, but there may be items where that's not possible due to other state or federal laws.
Sort
Can
of
we repeat the question?
Ken's question too. What's the meaning of the G versus P if the G overrides the P anyways?
So Lee, if you wouldn't mind getting closer to the microphone and
Yes,
repeat the
thanks.
question, Nina was asking for that, so she can help us.
Can the general development plan prohibit an item that's listed as a use, that's listed as a P?
In a PUD, probably, if it's, because usually the PUD is more specific. But that wouldn't go to the code, that would go to what's on the PUD. If I'm understanding the question correctly?
And Lee, maybe a little slight further clarification by prohibit. So my understanding of a permitted use is, we or the city council couldn't deny that use. It's a permitted use for that zone. Now, once a PUD is written, if it does not include that use, then I guess there's sort of a voluntarily choosing not to make use of that permission.
By inference, a PUD describes what uses are allowed. And if it's not described as an allowed use,
Right.
it's not allowed
But we couldn't
typically.
deny, my understanding, we couldn't deny. If someone came in and wanted to put, what was accessory dwelling or one of those that has a P, we couldn't deny that PUD plan for that reason. But if it didn't include that, and then once the PUD is approved,
Omitted
then
it or denied it,
What's that?
does that override? It's Ken's question too. It's understanding the
Yeah.
a P and a G. Is G what you need, not a P?
Yeah, I would think so, but
I think there's an important difference. Like I said, if it's a G, then based on the recommendation and approval by the city council, they could choose to allow or not allow a G use.
I don't think it's a big deal having it there, but it might be worth chewing on. Does it
Okay.
need a footnote or some further explanation about
But
how both possibilities?
I was
and
fine
don't
with
know,
going
we
to
need
the
have it looked
G
at
in
by
that
somebody.
column.
One at a time,
I'm sorry.
please, for the minute taker as well as us listening.
yeah,
So Lee was saying something, and then we'll go to Ken. What were you saying, Lee?
No, just say it may, I'm not sure that it's a problem having it written as it is now, but there may be some possible confusion that should be clarified by a note added to it or some provision, just to clarify how it's read.
And Ken, what were you saying then?
My interpretation of the document that I read was that the G was going to go in for PUDs where those were uses that would be considered available to be put on a plan document for a PUD. And if it was blank, then that use would not be allowed or considered as an acceptable use in a PUD. That was the distinction.
Correct.
And so throwing the P in there is kind of confusing me because I was thinking they were all going to G that were able to be considered as an acceptable use in a PUD. That was where I thought we were going.
and as I read the subtle distinction is if it's a P, that use cannot be denied. If they come in with a PUD plan that includes a P use, that use cannot be
By virtue of
denied.
it being,
Except I thought our attorney just said it could be,
Now,
plan can override it and
No.
deny it.
let's walk that dog a little farther then. Okay, so it's permitted use, it cannot be denied, but if it's not included in the plan, then once that plan is approved, then you could argue then until that plan is modified that it's not an available, I don't want to say permitted or that.
I think you're confusing a little bit.
It's not
When
an available use once that plan is approved without it. I'm throwing that out as how I understand it, but I would like the attorney to chime in. And are we on the mark? Are we off the mark? Please help us.
And real quickly, Nina, before
Yeah,
you
thanks.
in the code that's proposed, the explanation of G says general development plan. A G in a cell indicates the use may be allowed per PUD general development plan for the
Right.
specific PUD zone. So-
Okay.
Right, so that makes sense. I think the P is where was to conform with the voter initiative that we didn't, draft to conform with the rest of our code. So I think it really depends on the specific plan. So that's why you basically do a PUD is that alternative setup. So it depends on the plan itself. So yeah, everything Karen said and you all are explaining seems to be the case that this is an available, something that if it's G, it's just something that's available. But then again, the plan is going to govern, because that's the whole point of the PUD, is that it's very specific as to those details.
Let me make a comment here. Permitted uses in an urban residential zone can be submitted to Karen and the planning department, and they can put it through and they get it approved and it goes through because it's permitted. It doesn't come to planning commission. A PUD, general development plan, has to be submitted.
Mhm.
It always comes to the planning commission and it always has to be approved.
Mhm.
So whatever goes on the general development plan, whether it's a non-owner occupied STR or a small business home occupation, it gets reviewed and approved before, or recommended for approval to the city council, and they have to put an ordinance in place to approve the general development plan. Is that not correct?
The general development plan is part of establishing the PUD zone district.
Correct.
So that's when that happens. So you essentially make a recommendation to city council that we approve this framework of setbacks and uses for this general conceptual layout. If it's a variety of things, we approve this for this PUD. And then that's what we're referring to in the future when somebody comes back in and subdivides this section and puts in family lots. We're looking, did it comply with that general development plan? Are they consistent with the setbacks that they said they wanted to see there?
When that plan is created, so not after it's done, but when it's in the creation phase, if it's a permitted use, it's my understanding that that cannot be denied.
Yeah, it's like the UR zone, down the line, you've got a platted lot. It's designed for single family homes. We said, yes, we want single family homes there. So if somebody then says, I want to build a single family home on this lot, it comes through just us at that administrative level.
Whereas a G could be not approved.
I'm just saying,
No, the G.
there's a couple things that are permitted uses in the PUD column, the accessory use structure, home occupation, on accessory and temporary uses. I was thinking everything else is pretty much going to be G, and nothing is going to go straight through Karen on a PUD or a new PUD zone that doesn't come to the planning commission and the city council.
So let me give you the example. It's similar to the Stone Ridge neighborhood. Once you've got an established PUD, you've got areas that you want to see subdivided for single family homes. So at a subsequent point, you have an application that comes in for a plat to divide and make lots for single family homes. So after that subdivision is approved, anytime somebody's making an application to build a home on one of those platted lots, those don't come back through planning commission. That's handled administratively because it's consistent with the PUD.
But permission for that was in the PUD zone, general
Correct. It was
development
part of-
plan approval,
Correct.
not in this table. Because it's a PUD.
Well, that's why I was trying to draw a very clear distinction for when a PUD is in the creation phase versus after a PUD has been created and has an approved plan. Well, then that plan governs what can and cannot go in there.
Correct.
I'm saying
Correct.
in the initial approval creation phase, I don't believe that the city council could deny a permitted use in a PUD. It's permitted.
It's not permitted until the general development plan has been approved. That's the approval of what goes in the PUD. So there is no denial.
A PUD requires a plan, but but if they wanted to put in a chicken coop, I assume that's a G. Let's assume from the conversation here, that's a G. That could be denied. If they wanted to put in an accessory dwelling unit, I believe that was a P. In my view, my understanding, in the creation of the PUD plan, that could not be denied. That's a permitted use in a PUD.
Well,
See the difference?
the PUD is developing the zoning.
Yeah.
And any part of it could be denied if we decide that that's not an appropriate use of that land. Any part of it.
This also applies to PUD plan amendments.
Once the PUD was created, it says we're going to put a bank here and a gas station here. They can go right through them and put the gas station in and the bank. But if they want to put in a car wash like we experienced, that has to come back and it's a revision to the PUD. So I disagree with you. A PUD is reviewed in whole and it can be denied. Doesn't matter what this table says. It comes as a PUD, a general development plan, and whatever they have on there doesn't just go through. It has to be approved, or it could be not approved, depending on what the city and the planning commission and the city council decide. But that's my interpretation.
The other thing you have going on here is with a number of these uses that are listed as a P under the PUD, there's a standards column that needs to be met. So the example of an accessory dwelling unit, unless there's a single family home that was allowed at that location in that PUD, you don't get to put in an accessory dwelling unit because that's one of the standards. It goes hand in hand with that. So the same thing with a primary residence short-term rental. There's a whole list of standards that have to be met as part of doing a primary residence short-term rental. You know, one is you need the house. The owner needs to live there. And, you know, there's a number of other criteria that need to be met as part of that. So hopefully that gives you some comfort around where you do see a letter other than a G under that PUD column. Part of what that G is really doing is it's telling staff, you know, when somebody comes to you and they've got a piece of property, you check the zoning, what is it they want to do? That our current table, I don't know that it's that great or accurate, and it causes us some anxiety and concerns sometimes in terms of it says this is permitted, but is it really, that's all businesses there, you know, and yet you can put houses. It's just this like, can you really do that? So that G tells us, it's like, no, go back and check the PUD documents. Don't rely on all of this specifically. There's another resource that needs to be vetted as part of assisting that property owner.
Accessory dwelling units is currently a G designation. There's only 5 permitted uses. One's accessory structure, one is a home business, and then there's 3 regarding antennas. Home occupation, yes, is one.
I thought you were headed in the right direction with the G. The little confusion over here about putting a P in one short-term rental allowed and then not putting a P in the other one. I thought the G was the better answer for that column. For all those type of structures, it had to be part of the general development plan. So that's just my comment.
And I guess my thought is that may change over time, but to Mr. Sparnan's comment and our desire to be very consistent with that ordinance that was adopted by this community as a whole, it probably really does need to be as he suggested, which is that the P for the primary residence one. So there's very, very few primary residence short-term rentals out there. So that doesn't cause me much in the way of anxiety. And so the non-primary residence short-term rental not being allowed is pretty consistent with the intent of that ordinance, which was to keep the essentially
what percentage of PUDs
STRs out of the neighborhoods.
Sorry, what percentage of PUDs are residential areas? Maybe half or less?
I don't have that type of a metric.
I don't know that we have that many. There's Walmart PUD, the Karis PUD, the
Safeway, Stone Ridge.
Safeway, Stone Ridge, yeah.
You have 67, which are primarily residential.
Yeah. But so it makes sense to leave it out of that. It's not likely to be a commercial zone that wants to be a bunch of STRs, but anyway, okay. I agree with that we take it off as a permitted, don't put anything in that column for the non-primary.
So that's what Jen had documented up there. So any other thoughts, questions, concerns, discussion on that specific to the short-term rentals being consistent with the voters?
Do you want to, if there's more, collect them all, and then we'll make one motion at the end to approve with the recommended changes? Is that how you want to move forward?
I'm actually comfortable since we're on this topic, that if you guys are comfortable, we can actually take a straw poll on this and record that on this document. So that way we're not having to circle back and have the same conversation again.
Do you need a motion?
Sure.
I
Maybe
move we,
you-
Rather than a motion, why don't we just have the straw poll when,
I'm just,
I don't want, I want to avoid getting motions and motions because you know that confusing gets.
yeah, no, I'm all
Just
for
a
it.
straw poll, somebody agrees, then somebody, when they're making a motion, they can reflect that accordingly in the motion. Does everyone agree with the changes displayed for under chapter 4? Or would like some other variation? Thumbs up, thumbs. Yeah, that seems to be.
Looks unanimous,
Let's
Jim.
do it
So
simple.
7-0.
Let the silent vote be recorded as unanimous.
6-0. Oh, 6, sorry. Who am I missing?
No?
No one.
Yeah,
I thought I had somebody else appointed.
The ghost of Larry.
I guess,
One-
I
one- well,
apologize.
it Doesn't change the formal planning commission action. It's another month and a half or more before the city council gets this with a work session. There will be questions that come up. The work session will generate questions from the city council, all of which must be carefully considered because it's ultimately their document to go with or not go with. So if further thought is merited on some of these things, I trust that Karen will bring it forward to the city council, make sure they're aware of any additions that make sense to whatever recommendation the planning commission may come up with.
Absolutely. That's part of what we would be talking to them about as the planning commission held their public hearing. And this is part of what gets recorded and taken to them very specifically, that they were comfortable with the document as a whole, but do recommend these following revisions. So this would be very specifically drawn to their attention. And if there's anything else that you have concerns about.
I have one item I just want to bring up. It was a response to a suggestion I made, and Karen and Jenna had included the comment, and I'm comfortable with the resolution, but I just wanted to make people aware of it, and then just kind of hit home on one specific part, and this is regarding the powers and duties section on the, it's in chapter 6 in the Board of Adjustment, 603030D. Just wanted to be clear on where the Board of Adjustment has the authority to decide and hear and make a change from an appeal. Originally, it was kind of covered in the table. It got a little confusing. Took it out of the table, and in the conversation I had with Karen, it's like really it's all administrative type actions. And I just wanted to be comfortable that came through clear enough. Said to hear and decide appeals when it alleged there is an error in any order, requirement, decision, or determination made in the administration of this UDC. So as I understand it, that means the administrative actions, not the, for example, the quasi-judicial type hearing and decisions. Those would not be subject to the Board of Adjustment, with one oddball exception, and that be for flood damage prevention regulations. But is that sufficiently clear? Does that what decisions are subject to appeal and which ones are not?
It is from a staff perspective and a professional planner perspective in administering regulations. Because, you know, under that, it says, you know, the Board of Adjustment looks at variances. So if you've got an unusual shaped piece of property and I need to change the setback, that clearly goes to Board of Adjustment. If I'm, or one of my staff members, that we apply a provision of the code that, I don't know, some creative interpretation to get to somebody being allowed to put a bread manufacturing facility in their backyard as a home occupation, that the neighbors could appeal that decision that would happen at administrative level and go, no, planning staff had their heads up their butts. And no, they did this wrong, and we want the Board of Adjustment to decide, ideally, that planning staff did this wrong. So that's the kind of thing that would go to the Board of Adjustment. A QJ decision that's decided by City Council that is potentially appealed in courts, not back to Board of Adjustment. And some of that is spelled out statutorily, and not necessarily like in this particular document, but from a trained planner perspective, it's clear to me.
Right, and through our conversations prior to this edit to the text here, it's clear to me, it's clear to
Okay,
you.
good.
I
It's
just,
clear to our city attorney.
I just hope it's clear to the, others in the general populace, and that's why I just wanted to invite that discussion.
Well, and they could appeal our interpretation.
But to the board or to a court? Sorry.
Exactly. But yeah, no, I'm very comfortable with it. It's very, very typical of codes throughout the state of Colorado.
Reads. Okay.
But I
Okay.
do agree with you previously, when we tried to include appeal bodies in the process tables, it did
got
get
muddy.
a little sideways. So that's a great example of how we really value your feedback and review of the document, took it very seriously and made appropriate adjustments, when it needed to happen. So thank you.
Thanks.
Any other matters people wish to bring? Hearing nothing, can I ask, can you bring back up the last page of the staff report, which had a recommendation paragraph on it? Ask if someone might like to make a motion, and I think this other discussion can probably be adequately referenced by the revision relating to a PUD use was discussed. Something like that sufficient without trying to
Or you could even reference as documented, because we have it down very specifically that, if you're comfortable with, recommending going forward with this, with the proposed revision to the use table in chapter 4 as documented.
Personally, I think it's important enough when a question was raised is what's the most consistent way to draft this to match up with the citizen initiative. I think that's an important item that we do include.
Okay, I'll jump in and see how far I can get.
You got it.
Yeah, may need that. I move that the Planning Commission recommend City Council approve the proposed ordinance repealing Title 16 mobile homes, Title 17 subdivisions, Title 18 zoning, and Section 5.24 wireless communication facilities of the Woodland Park Municipal Code to reestablish and adopt said regulations as the Unified Development Code for the City of Woodland Park, with the additional modifications to STR and PUD zoning as discussed and documented.
I'll second.
Karen, are you comfortable with that?
I
You good
am.
with that?
Yeah, I am.
Any further discussion on the motion? We call the question then.
Absolutely. Ken Hartsfield,
Yes.
Don Hoying,
Yes.
Ken Kennedy,
Yes.
Jared Newcomb,
Yes.
Chair Brown,
Yes.
and Don DeZellem.
Yes.
6-0. Approved.
Step closer.
Thank you very much, and thank you everyone for your comments this evening. Very helpful and constructive to ensure that we take a solid recommendation and product forward to City Council. As we discussed previously, and this kind of falls under reports, we'll be
Before you
doing
go,
at a
Karen,
staff level.
Before you do reports, I just wanted to summarize the discussion as well. Just
Sure.
appreciate the work you put into it for three plus years. Jen, thank you what you're doing. I know there was some dissatisfaction expressed in one of the comments about availability for public review, but I thought it was quite an effort made to get this out to the public in early December and receive comments all the way through until a week or more, week into January. I'm sure you'll still be interested, as I discussed a few minutes ago, but receiving any additional comments, people had them, we'll look at them. If there's errors or omissions or things we needed to fix, there's still opportunities to do that. And I appreciate everything the staff has done to support it. I think it's been quite an effort. And thank you.
Thank you for your kind words. I do appreciate that because it's been a long project.
I'll second that. Comments from Ken?
So I was just gonna restate that Jen and I will be doing a work session with City Council on February 5th to help make sure they are well-oriented and have a good understanding of this document prior to actually being in a public hearing forum. And I've been encouraging them through the city manager to go and look at the orientation videos that we had prepared. They're still posted on the website, as well as the public hearing document. And we'll update the other information to reflect your recommendation. So that will definitely show up on that website. Because when you're talking about a document that thick, because it's what, 300 pages-ish, it's substantial. So each of the chapters are listed individually, and it's probably the easiest way for folks to access that document and review and look at it at their leisure, especially thanks to the magic of technology and websites nowadays, as opposed to asking us to print a paper copy or spend hours inside City Hall grinding through a paper copy. I would like to think that the technology is very helpful and supportive for folks being able to look at things.
Thanks to the public who submitted comments too. That was really good.
I said I
We
did
got
not
good
have,
public involvement.
it wasn't like a huge volume of folks, but the folks that did look at it really dove in depth, like you guys have.
Great.
So it's very nice. That's all I had this evening. I do not have any hearing items or any business for you guys for your February 8th meeting, I believe is the date. So at this point, it looks like you're going to get a bye week. So thank you.
Okay, unless there's something else. Meeting adjourned.
Thank you.
Last we submitted, Bill's official.
Hang on.